Okay, hopefully that other video didn't cut out too soon. I went over the time by 3 minutes. If you missed some of the action, I apologize. I'm going to review it. I'm not going to review it right now because I'm knapping this continuously. I don't want to take a break right now and review the last video. If it cut off, all I did was I was thinning this curvature in the middle, this convexity in the middle, thinning it down, trying to make it a little straighter, although it's going to be a little curved. All right, this is going to be a knife, so it doesn't matter if it's curved. And it doesn't really matter too much if projectile points are curved slightly either. If you're not able to nap around the curve and make it straight, if you're not able to make it perfectly straight, it's not a deal breaker. It's no big deal. The projectile point will still work, even with a very slight curve in it. It's not going to affect the airflow, especially with that lateral dart point. It just doesn't have enough air resistance to change the flight of the projectile in any meaningful way. I'm sure if you get down to the extremely precise measurements, there will be a difference, but not for what we're concerned with, short range hunting. Okay, let's see. All right, so I'm going to switch to pressure. Put the barb on this side that's more complete. I'm pretending that I messed this up somehow. Okay. And I'm going without a glove so you can see the finger placement. Not that my finger placement is perfect, but just to give you an idea. I don't get a lot of experienced pressure flaking guys commenting on my videos, so I might be doing it right. If I'm not, you can comment and say, that's not the way I do it. And then I'll watch one of your videos so I can see how you do it. So I push the preform up, or the workpiece up to the front of the pad. A lot of times I do miss the pad and hit my hand, but it's not usually too bad because I'll hit the pad first. Well, I tried to. I don't know what I was trying to do there. Maybe I was trying to get rid of that lump. I'm not sure exactly, but I wasn't knapping in the correct direction to straighten that curve. Oh, let's put a twist in it. How's that? I blew off the tip there. I'm not all the way to the front of the pad there because I'm not putting a lot of pressure. When I'm putting a lot of pressure on it, I'll move it to the front. There's two reasons for that. One, it's much easier to apply because it's a short tip. If it's way up here, this hits the pad, the wood hits the pad. Another reason is there's friction back here when I'm pushing on it. There's slight friction against the pad, so that holds the workpiece more steady. And if I want long flakes, I do passive pressure, or pressure that surprises me when the flake is removed, like that one there. Okay, so I've got a twist at the tip. Okay, so now we'll do the notch. I've got a fairly thick one. These are notchers. And a very thin one. I'm going to use a thicker one. Again, I'm not using a lot of pressure. You never want to use a whole lot of pressure when you're notching. If you have to use a lot of pressure, your preform is too thick. I'll say that again. If you're using a lot of pressure for notching, your preform is too thick. Passive pressure to pop out those flakes, those very important flakes that thin it down as you go ahead. Oops. Sometimes the edge is too thin for the pressure and it just crushes, but it's fine as long as you can have an opportunity to remove a flake from the other side. I'm not using all that much pressure. But still, you can blow off an ear easily, even without a lot of pressure. So, oops, I blew off part of the stem there. So I have to be using even less pressure, which means I may stall this out. I'm going to go as deep as I can with it. mainly downward pressure. I think that's sufficient. Maybe just one more pop out to make it look sharp. Make it look like I didn't stall it. The bottom of your notches should not look stalled out on most points. Okay. Most artifacts have notches, as far as I know. Could be wrong about that. I might be wrong as far as that lateral dart points are concerned. Many at lateral dart points I have seen with at least some stalling or some grinding at the bottom of the notch or the foot of the notch. So I could be wrong about that. But for the most part, on arrowheads, true arrowheads, or projectile points, the bottoms or the foot of the notches are not stalled out. Okay, so I'm just trying to make the stem symmetrical. Okay, and I'm going to make it look like I blew off this barb on this side by accident. Okay. So yeah, that's what I would call a one-eared knife when it's reused. Somehow I created a flake when I was notching that went up along the edge here, kind of like a Buren scar. So I don't really need to remove that, but I'm going to, just for the sake of symmetry or good form, I guess. Not symmetry. Because this point is not symmetrical, obviously. Steel is really not the best material for this. For sharpening the edge, there's a lot of crushing and slipping, and Antler does a lot better. Does a lot better job at this, at sharpening the edges. And slipping just means I'm not applying pressure exactly where I want it. It slips around and it applies pressure in a different area, and a lot of times it'll step or crush. Okay, that's enough. It's got a twisted tip on it. Okay. So yeah, I think that's good enough. Maybe a little more sharpening on the edge. Okay, nice thin stem. Let's see. Okay, so these are sufficient for knives of when they're this size. This would normally be an lateral dart point. The width of the stem is 3/4 approximately, if that little bit wasn't nipped off the ear. The neck is about a 1/2 inch. Okay. I've got some stuff here to compare. Typical lateral dart point foreshaft. It's going to be about 13 millimeters or a 1/2 inch. Pretty typical of lateral dart foreshafts. And this notch is too fat or too big for this point, but it'll work. And it's a little bit too deep too. Usually you haft it so that the top of the foreshaft here is right at the neck, the shortest dimension of the neck. Okay. So if I was going to use this as a knife, I would haft it to that. The notch would be appropriate. This one's too big, obviously, and it will look like this. Now, not all foreshafts have shoulders like this one. Some of them do. I believe most of them did not. Okay, and I did have this, obviously, on a different point. I took it off so I could use it as a pattern, because this is the typical lateral dart foreshaft. Okay. So I would haft it like this and use it as a knife. Same with the other ones. This one can be hafted in two ways. You can either haft it up to where the neck is, very short haft, or haft it on a much bigger foreshaft and haft it higher, and even use part of the blade as a place to wrap So I would probably on this one use a larger piece of wood like this. I consider this a knife handle and this a dart point foreshaft. You can see the differences both in the way that they are shaped and the width, shaped in this direction and in this direction. It's going to be wider than it is wider in this direction than this direction. With an atlatl dart foreshaft, it's completely round in most cases. But with a knife, you usually have it flatter in one direction like this. Okay, so I would have it like this. With this particular one, since I would probably be doing some heavy-duty cutting of cordage or hides, I would sink the stem low into the foreshaft. I call this a foreshaft because it can still be mounted onto another shaft like a spear shaft. Anyway, I would mount it low and use part of the blade here for the wrapping, and just crisscross. Go across this way, go across that way, wrap around all the way down until I get about to there. For this one, and it would look like this. Yeah. Use it as a knife. This one here, same deal, but I wouldn't haft it as deep. I have it to about here. And it would look like that. This one, same deal. This is too deep, so I would haft it less deep and about to there. And the same rule applies as far as centering the point on the axis of the foreshaft. When I mount these, I spin them so that the point is not moving around when I'm spinning this. You know what I mean? I center it just like if I was mounting it on a lattice dart foreshaft. Anyway, I'd move it around and keep moving it until I get it so that that tip does not move when I'm spinning the foreshaft. You know what I'm saying? Okay. So whatever it would take for me to center that tip onto this axis would be where I would haft it. Okay. So it it may mean that this was broken in use and it was still hafted and I took it down while it was still hafted and used it as a knife after that. Or it can still be used as a little dart point. It doesn't really matter if it has one barb or two. It can still be used as an little dart point. It will still work. And that's why I center it, so it can be a multi-use tool. If you had to in a pinch, you could still fire this. It still works perfectly well. And that kind of thing. But it would be primarily used as a knife. Presumably because, both barbs, two barbs are better than one if you're using it as a projectile point. Okay. But a lot of times we, as knappers, make mistakes on these barbs. And instead of starting over or totally eliminating the stems, you can just make these one-eared knives, which will also work as projectile points. But for the purpose of the video, I'm just calling these one-eared knives. Okay.